we did a lot of migrations, and a lot of them now with Python 3, we have an additional reason to good argument to sell Plone 5 to Plone 4 users. So we're doing migration from Plone 4 to Plone 5 at the moment. A lot of them, a lot of these sites still have lingua Plone. They need to be migrated to Plone multilingual. They still have archetypes, lots of that, and also need to be migrated from Python 2 to Python 3. So one of the things I learned in the past years is that every migration is different, only not so much, because they have kind of the same problems in maybe not identical but very similar ways. So I found that I can reuse most of not only the lessons I learned but also the code that I use for these migrations. And since I got a lot of requests, I did a little package called Collective Migration Helpers that contains all the code, almost all the code that I'm showing today. I'm going to show code from other packages as well. So if you're interested in reusing any of the methods in there, just go there. So the most important lesson I learned from doing migrations is automate everything. So write upgrade steps, put everything in code and put it in code so it can run multiple times, it can be run easily, and it can be run in different contexts. Let's look at an example what I mean by that. This is a very simple small method that disables Solar. So it does a couple of things that are interesting here. So one is that you might see the context equals none. In an upgrade step, the first argument is usually the portal setup tool. If you so you can run that as an upgrade step if you register it, but I'm not using the context at all. So that means I can also run it from a PDB, for example, from a debug console and bin instance debug. I can even run it from a instance run script. I can run it from a browser view, whatever. So it's very flexible. This is number one. So the second thing is I keep imports inside the upgrade step or the upgrade function in this case. So in case collective Solar doesn't exist, I don't have an import at the top, and I also do make the import conditionally, so I check if I actually can import Solar. If not, I'm actually not going to do anything. So it doesn't hurt me if I run this code in a site that's never heard of Solar. And also, if it's been run before, so the Solar was disabled like 10 minutes ago, it doesn't hurt at all. And the last thing is that I log what I'm doing. So log info, Solar disabled. If I'm not disabling Solar, I'm not logging anything. So that's kind of easy things, but if you follow these simple patterns, you will be able to combine your upgrade steps into something that is easily reusable. Another example is this. It can run multiple times again. It can be run in different contexts. It disables a couple of LDAP authentication plugins and tries to delete them and logs it if it's there, doesn't log it if it isn't there. As you can see, a lot of migrations are similar but different. So probably none of your projects have a AD plugin _ BG48. Just one of mine did. This is why the project and the code in the repository is there for you to copy and paste into your own modules. It's not meant. You can use it to import certain things, but that's not the initial intention. So also these two are actually the first two things you should always run. Maybe not exactly these. Maybe you don't have Solar but Elasticsearch. And you don't have LDAP, but have something, I don't know, Plone app LDAP. This is whatever. But these are two things you don't want while doing migrations, calling some external search index. The worst would be writing into that, the production search index while you're doing migration on a different machine, because the Plone instance keeps the URL from the, or the IP from the Solar instance, for example. That would be terrible. And also you don't want LDAP to be asked every time you do something on your during development. So, but before you do that, you try to get some information. Get the bird's eye view, is how I called it. So you want to learn as much as you can about your site, what content types are there, what add-ons are there, how old your items are, how many items there are, how heavy, I mean in megabytes they are, about local roles, about placeful workflows, about all kinds of things. And here's a small example from the statistics module in the package I made public. This is a helper view, it's a browser view in this case, that will, you don't have to read all this, will list a lot of useful information that is that you usually want to know. For example, how many items of which type there are. So there's obviously 884 help center leaf pages in this portal. Where that content is, so there's obviously some weird folder that, I don't know, services that contains a lot of stuff. Also, how old your content is. So something was very weird in 2019 because in they had 1,900 events, so pretty busy year probably. And also where you actually, the biggest objects live. Sometimes you have people uploading whole ISO images into Plone instances. So we have a huge zip file of 600 megabytes on the top, and it's sorts them by size. Just a small example, you can adapt the code to your need. Another thing I like to do is find out where the content is that needs to be removed at some point. So when you find out what kind of add-ons you have, you see here we have Plone Form Gen, Help Center, Collage, and Calendar X folder. These are in that project. These were used quite a lot, and it tells me now, okay, where is that? How many items are in there? Because most of them are containerish. Which one was created? From which year are these items? And with this information, you can send emails to people who are in charge of the site and ask them, okay, this is what you have. This is where it is. What do you want to do with this? And more often than not, the answer is going to be, oh, I had no idea this actually still existed. Please remove it. So you don't have to deal with that. But unless you can't make that decision yourself, unless you're the project manager content-wise, which you usually are not as a developer. So the second big lesson is to divide and conquer. In an abstract way, that means deal with one problem at a time and ignore and replace, remove and replace one add-on at a time, solve one problem at a time, and ignore problems that don't block you. Put them in a to-do list, and they may have just gone away in Plone 5.2. So that is important advice. Divide and conquer also means divide your migrations into a multitude of upgrade steps. So have one upgrade step for every single thing you do, so you can run them separately, either in the PDB or with portal setup. So these are a couple of upgrade steps, migrating images, migrate everything else to Plone content types, uninstall archetypes, and only when this actually works for enough times and you're content and you don't want to click so many buttons anymore, you can combine them into one upgrade steps group, as Plone itself does. So this allows you to run them separately, so you get an individual commit after each upgrade step, as long as you do it in the user interface. So if step 2 takes 5 minutes, and in step 3, you're going to get an error, and you run them sequentially without a commit in between, you get very angry at yourself. You'll hate yourself. So don't do that. Also, Um, you might be tempted to use branches for your upgrade steps and migration code. Um, Please don't. In Plone, we have things that can help you not do that. One would be moving imports into the code, have conditional imports that fail when you don't have that, like, I don't know, no more lingua Plone, you don't have to do anything because you're now in Plone 5.1. Also, you can register upgrade steps conditionally with have ZCML condition have Plone blah version, as Plone itself does it. So register your steps. You can decide to register your steps like this. Here's one example. Only if you have Plone 5, you should be able to run this step to uninstall archetypes. So this sounds really easy, but it's totally not. But there are a couple of nice tricks that you should use and keep in mind. One thing super obvious, which nobody does, is just remove 98% of your content from the portal that you want to migrate. I often have very huge databases to deal with during migrations, and okay, my laptop is fast, but still it takes a lot of time to move this data around. So write something like this that deletes all files and images that are bigger than 1 MB. Just one example. Don't remove any folders, but if you have 80 help centers and 50,000 documents and 900,000 news items, just remove 99% of each of these items and try to deal with everything else. But keep the content structure in place, because don't delete any folders, because A, they're not heavy, I mean in megabytes, only their content is. And B, this will save you from running into issues later, like local roles and portlets are mostly assigned on folders, and these are things that sometimes break your migrations. So if you keep these, everything that is containerish, keep everything there, unless it's something like a Plone Help Center, which is always kind of the same. But if you have folders or other folder types, keep them around. And you can still fix any corner cases after your migration runs through. So I showed that already. Another tip I got from Alessandro is do not migrate blobs. Because the blob itself will not change. Neither if from archetype to dexterity, nor from Python 2 to Python 3, the PDF that lives on the file system is always going to be the same. And if you use an add-on called Experimental Graceful Blob Missing, which actually even works with rel storage now, since I haven't merged that yet, but it's there. You move the files, the blob storage away. Just I don't know, move it to a backup folder, and you use that. This add-on will create a empty file with a marker text in it for everything that it touches. So it's really fast because it's a very small file, and you can re-add the blobs once the whole migration is done later. Since the UIDs in any sane migration will stay identical, the path to the blob file will also stay identical. You need to keep the blob files during cleanup. So if you decide, I need to remove this and this and this and this, and for this you need the blobs because you really want to lose the blobs as well. So don't forget that. So that is also nice, tiny thing. When you copy a big database from a production server or from one server to another, also copy the data fs.index, because re-indexing a really big database on startup can take, I don't know, up to half an hour. Depends on how big it is. This is nice. So you gotta forget the past and forgive your sins. The easiest, and you need permission for all that, but you will, it's a technical requirement anyway, but you need to talk to your clients. We're gonna remove all revisions. For example, this is a 5-line of code which changed a data FS from 21 gigabytes to 3 gigabytes, and the blob storage from 91 gigabytes to 50 gigabytes, just by removing all revisions. And yes, binary files can be versioned. You should not do that, but some clients do. So you will have, this is how we went from 91 to 50 gigabytes because binary files were versioned. An alternative to this would be to use Collective Revision Manager. If you want to control this manually, you can decide how many items you want to keep for which objects and so on. So that's nice. The second part of your past is previous commits. You need to pack the database. That takes a while. The important thing is set it to day 0. That is very important to keep 0 days. That's very important when you try migrate to Python 3 later on. Okay, now let's go to the hard part, add-ons. So here's a simple example. Removes an add-on that is easy to remove, and it's after that it's actually gone. And it's a good pattern. You could add more logging, but that's fine. Moving on to a slightly more complicated example. This is also a very small add-on, but it changes existing content. So when you remove an add-on, sometimes it adds additional views. You have to unregister these in generic setup, for example, so that they're no longer allowed. But you also have to unset them on the objects that use these views, for example. So this is one small example. The important thing is to drop the layout attribute property from all objects that have this first. That's like a replacement for default views. Don't really recommend it, but yeah. Okay, bit more advanced. Here is a portlet, because portlets create content, portlets in this case, and you have to go through the site and find them. In this case, I actually knew where it was. It's an NM example intranet, that's where it was, so it's easy to find. But in the package is also code to find portlets anywhere of a certain kind. Yeah, so you can use that to remove portlets. That's tricky. So for those who don't know that, the Portal Quick Installer has a feature, has its own registry that stores information about all add-ons that were imported, that were installed. And depending on the age and the state of the add-on it was in when it was first installed, this will contain different information, including types. Some add-ons have a types XML that contains all types where they set additional information on, and not only a types XML that contains the types that it actually registers, which is a simple beginner bug. The result from that is that upon uninstalling this add-on, this type will be gone. If that type is your folder, like in this case, or a collection, like in this case, you're in big trouble, because then you have to reinstall the type or re-register the type, taking it from Plone content types or wherever it came from, the one you want. So, but when uninstalling a add-on, you can pass it a modified cascade that is different from the default cascade in the quick installer, and that will save you from that trouble. That's the same thing happens with the registry, or used to happen with the registry. It was totally nuked when uninstalling some add-ons, and nothing ever worked anymore unless you reinstalled the registry, which was easy but not obvious, and the error message was not, oh, you just lost the registry, please reinstall the registry. It was something very much more obscure. Just quickly about profiles. You can and you should use uninstall and upgrade profiles like Plone does. So personally, I'd like to, I admit that I like the approach to have all the stuff during a migration in Python. So I only have to look in one place what it actually does. But some things are actually much, much easier to achieve with generic setup than in Python. So I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence on this. Here's an example of an upgrade step in Plone itself. This is how it's registered, and it has, I was supposed to show the structure now in my editor, which I don't have. Okay, you can check that yourself. It is in it's in Plone Up Upgrades, and there is a folder that is called 2RC4 release candidate 4, and it contains a folder XML that removes a view and the actions XML and the toolset XML and stuff like that. Just look up these examples. Okay, moving on to persistent. This is hard. There are really long blog posts about that, and it's you can uninstall utilities and tools and components with generic setup, but it doesn't always die the way you want it. So you can do that in Python as well. Here's one example from the package I released that removes utilities and adapters that are used by Lingua Plone. It doesn't hurt to run this code 50 times. I actually have a migration where I run this after each individual upgrade step, because I had cases when, I don't know, maybe it was my fault, or my commit didn't go through properly. So I just put this at the end of every single upgrade step I had there, and bam, it worked well. I'm not going to walk through the code, but it's if you know what you want to remove, removing it is actually really simple, because utility subscriber, and then you put the name of the thing and remove it. Bam. Not that hard. But since it is hard to figure out what to remove, and it's a tedious process to iterate over that, okay, something that's not dying, let's write a method to kill it. It's often more easy to actually patch it away. And there is a nice tool called Alias module. It's in Plone Up Utils, and it helps you to get rid of things that have a hard time dying. This is an example from WetDAV. So what it does is it adds IFTP access into the path, so it's importable by the persistent data in your database when it's unpickling the pickle that is referencing that, but it's replacing whatever it was before with an empty BBB interface. BBB means backward compatibility. I don't know, that doesn't make a sense, but someone came up with that at some point. Here's another example from Collective Easy Slideshow. So this is not a core thing, but this is an add-on that had a really hard time dying, and this was a very easy way to get rid of it. So if you feel dirty now, if you look at this code, you shouldn't, because this is how Plone Up Upgrade actually looks. These are only the first 30 lines from it. The file is much, much longer, and it runs every single time you start up Plone, and it patches away a lot of things that Plone and we got rid of over the years. But some of these things are really hard to uninstall and to clear out the database, because there might be old pickles that are no longer used. But if you go back in your database, you revert commits, then they are resurrected again, and this is this really hard technical problem. And this just this solves this in a very nice way. Moving on to Lingua Plone. Okay. So very important, migrate from Lingua Plone to Plone Up Multilingual while running in Python 4.3, not 3.4, please, and while still using archetypes. There's a built-in migration in Plone Up Multilingual, that actually works fine, but it mostly works if your content is not a total mess. But your content is very likely to be a total mess, because editors in Lingua Plone had the ability to do things that are not useful. For example, have a folder in one language and have mixed languages inside that folder, but part of that these translations are then in a different folder again. So it's a complete mess. And this is some code that you totally should read right now. That helps you clean up this. So only, I can't point, but somewhere in there are actually 2 lines of code that run the whole migration from lingua Plone to Plone up multilingual. They're conveniently called step 1 and 2, and the other was called step 3. So who calls a method step 1 and 2? I like that. Still, everything else, it's in the package. It tries to make an educated guess if you have two. This works with 2 languages, only can try to adapt it. And it tries to move stuff around in the sane way, so that your content, actually, if it doesn't have a language, it guesses the language from the language of the folder and from the language of the majority of the content in the folder. And if it's a different language, it creates a translation for the parent folder, and for untranslated folders, it looks into what language has the content, and so on, so on, so on. So it does a lot of stuff, and you can use it for your own good and at your own risk, please. It is. I'm not going to walk through that. That would take too long. There's also, yeah. Look at the whole lingua Plone module in Migration Helpers, if you still have that. So once you did that, all these things like clean up, remove add-ons, slim your database, remove your revisions, then you can safely upgrade to Plone 5.2, either from Plone 5.1 or from Plone 4.0, Plone 4.3, or whatever you want. So do that naturally while still in Python 2. Do that keeping archetypes still, if you have it. Have multilingual enabled if you have it. And if you come from Plone 4, I suggest you directly upgrade to Plone 5.2, or rather 5.2.1, which will be out soon. I saw a pending folder already on this Plone.org, so expect that within the week. In some rare cases, you might want to upgrade to 5.0.10 or 5.1.6 first, but I haven't had such a case, actually. So how you do that? Run 5.2 with archetypes. That's easy. Just add the archetypes extra to your build out, and it will pull in all the archetypes dependencies. And don't stop there. Don't run Plone on 5.2 with archetypes. That is just so insulting to everyone who put in work into Plone in the last 5 years. Go further from there. Then, yeah, there's also documentation about changes in Plone 5.2. They're really well documented, so please read the FM. And then migrate to dexterity in 5.2. I've covered this a couple of times already, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'm going to show you a couple of best practices. Especially for sites with a lot of content and complex things. If you say have a default site, just use you can use the form if you want. It's fine. Automate it. Migrate one type at a time. Start with the folders. And first, again, try it with a reduced database. So this is an example to migrate all files from archetypes to dexterity. This is not new. This has been in the documentation of Plone app content types since, I don't know, many years now, and it works fine. It has been improved. That's why I say use it in 5.2. For example, the patch searchable text, and a couple of other things in this method, the PAC migration. It makes it much faster if you skip indexing and patch searchable text away, because your searchable text is going to be the same anyway, so why would you want to re-index them just for the sake of migrating? If everything works fine, do it all at once. Even topics works out of the box. You can migrate topics to dexterity collections. Thank you. Much more interesting, custom content. So, for example, Plone Help Center. Who used Plone Help Center? Yeah, a couple of hands. It's easy to migrate. That's why I picked it for this purpose demonstration. Because it's mostly default content with constraints and a couple of views that look slightly different, and it has one additional feature that folders don't have, so you can manage versions, but my client doesn't use that feature at all. So I decided I'll just migrate it to default content like folders and pages. So this is an example to migrate the Help Center how-to folders. As I said, it's a couple of folders that are contain then how-tos with a constraint, and this is all you need. This does everything. You don't need anything else. This could be run from a PDB thing. It goes through the whole site, and it turns every single instance of a Plone Help Center how-to folder into a normal folder. Bam. Okay, there's a couple more complicated items. For example, the Help Center FAQ is a document. You can, that's interesting, it's not a folder. So you can specify a field mapping to map the text field to the text field and say that's a rich text. And so it's migrating the Help Center FAQ to a document, and it's keeping the rich text. You need to specify the fields because the source type doesn't come, it can't pick up the migration helper, the migrate custom AT thingy here, it doesn't know about Help Center FAQ. It knows about all the default content types in Plone, so if you have migrate a document to a document, it knows, there's a rich text field I need to migrate, but for Help Center FAQ, everything that is not like Dublin Core or one of the default fields needs to be specified here in a very simple way. You can specify something more complicated here, and this is a nice pattern you can use if you have a content type that you want to migrate to default content, but the content type you had before is mostly for archive purposes only, but it had like 50 rich text fields and 5 text fields on top of that. But you don't want that anymore. You just want the information that's in there. So what it does, it goes. It's a field migrator that concatenates these text fields one after the other, adding a small heading with the name of the field before that. So you have like 20 fields, and now they're in one rich text field because nobody's using the Plone Help Center anymore. Actually, they're using it, but now it's not called Plone Help Center, it's called a document, and you use sensible headings to add your content and not a structure. So this would then migrate the Help Center itself, because the Help Center has an additional field called rights. I have no idea what it holds. Some text. So I add that into the text field that it also has. So it has a rich text field, the Help Center. I should have specified that text to text as well. I forgot that. And also the rights to text field. So first it's text to text, and then rights to text is appended afterwards. So it's a nice pattern you could use. Once it's done, this has a lot of content types, the Plone Help Center, as you can see. Migrate the containers first and the items later, and you're done. All methods look exactly the same, like this, mostly. So they're super short, but it's one for each item. That's how it works. So for content where you have multiple items, like in Plone Form Gen, it's like you don't want to port the Plone Form the form folder to a easy form folder and then the AT whatever field to some other content type. That's not how it works, because easy form has a different way for that. You need to specify a more low-level migrator with this pattern. But this pattern will give you all the freedom you have. So with migrate Plone Form Gen using JSON, this would be called for every single instance of a Plone Form Gen folder. Self old would be the Plone Form Gen, form folder. Self new will be a new instance of easy form. It will already have the text, the title, and the description, and like local roles and all that nonsense. But what you can do in data self JSONify JPEG, doesn't exist yet, and self-easy form from JSON, passing it the data. It can put in whatever is required to move the archetypes, field descriptions to JSON, and then turn them into the what is it, supermodel XML schemata. So, but there's alternatives. One is the InPlace Migrator for Teamworks Upgrade. It is mostly interesting for folders because migrating folders can be very slow because what the default migration does, it moves all the content from it creates a new folder and moves the content over there, which is a process that can take a long time if you have a large tree. This is why I say you need to reduce your database size. We're patching away, in the default migration in Plone, we're patching away a lot of indexing and link integrity check, all the things that are really time consuming, but if you have a very large tree, it can still take quite some time. And this is would be an interesting alternative to look at. It's well documented. I haven't tried it, I have to say. And also, I have to ask, why is there no pull request for Plone content types that replaces the default migration of folders, like not every single step, but the moving of content from one to the other with this? I'm super open to discuss this because the default migration for folders uses the code from Proda's content migration. The second alternative is another beautiful thing I learned from Alessandro Pisa. He's a well of beautiful information. He gave a talk in 2017, and he proposes to use this pattern, which is actually also, there's a helper method in Plone content types that does the same thing. It changes the base class of the object. This is, again, very useful for folders. You just simply rip out the old base class, push in the new base class, and then set the object in there. And the content is still there. You still need to reinstantiate the underscore tree thingy, but it doesn't have to move the content from one to another. That is nice. That is useful. Okay. If you're interested in that, talk to Alessandro. He did I guess you did a lot of big migrations, maybe using that pattern for now. It would be nice to have some more documentation, blog posts or stuff. But the talk is really good. There's nice examples in it. So then you're on 5.2. You're running dexterity. You need to, oh God, I skipped this part. You need to remove archetypes after you migrate to dexterity. I forgot to write this chapter because I thought my talk is at 2 o'clock after lunch. But there is a method in the package I released that removes the archetypes because there are a couple of tools in there that are, again, won't die easily, but using the pattern there and what I pasted on collective Plone.org, community Plone.org, will deal with that. So then start up Plone without archetypes, so remove the extra in Python 2 still, and you should be good to go. Okay, the migration to Python 3 is also really well documented. I'm not going to repeat it. Just pointing you. Is something happening? No. I'm pointing you at the documentation. It is here. Please read it. It's well documented how to port your add-ons, and it's also well documented how to migrate your database. I'm not going to switch back to the browser, but there's a lot there. Keep a copy of your database, please. That's like the basics. Don't do a migration without a copy of it. This is how it basically looks like. You invoke this one command. This is the ideal output because it's a very small site. Usually it's bigger. Before you do that, pack your database to do 0 days again, because the old transactions will not be ported as far as I know. And important advice, I would ignore most of the things that ZODB Verify says, because if it doesn't stop the migration. If you have problems after startup, again, Alias module is your friend. It will help you patch away any problems of stuff that is still there, and you just keep it. The site's probably not going to live for 20 years into the future. So for the 18 years that it will live into the future, it can live with a couple of additional Alias modules. Another tip, if you use rel storage, migrate to to ZODB first. This is how you do that. Bin ZODB convert, and then you get a ZODB, because it's just it's easier to move a ZODB around than a Postgres database, at least for me. I don't know. That's maybe your mileage may vary. And also, the migration with the ZODB has been tested. It's not been tested so far while you keep your content in rel storage, for example, Postgres in this case. And then you clean up again. There's a couple things that are still broken. They're not taken care of. They need to move into core. I put them in this package so far because super busy. Yeah, I know, everyone else. This is one example. The searchable text index will be broken. So it will not be automatically converted. This takes care of that. It's an upgrade step. Just copy and paste it or import it and run it. It checks for the first item. If it's a byte, then it has to clear the index, and then, I don't know, it rebuilds it. Takes a while, but you need to do that only once. And then also, event indexes are still, in some old cases, are still old datetime, not new datetime. And also navigation portlets will be broken as if they have a custom navigation route, because that's a computed field, which is not properly, where are my, here, post Python 3 fixes, fix portlets, it's a, what is it? A computed value. And this is the example how you get any portlet, and here's you fix the portlet. Just set it to something else. 5 minutes, excellent, I can manage, if I find my mouse. Then you finalize, which basically means do some cleanup, you enable a new theme, or you gotta disable the theme. There's examples for all kinds of stuff in that package, or including dropping all this theme. There is code for removing all skin template, skin customizations, and portal view customizations. Please do that before you migrate, because otherwise you will have them in the database after you migrate it, and you will wonder why you can't access a certain folder tree, because there was a template overwritten and that no longer works. So yeah, there's a lot of useful stuff. There's one thing that is important here. Yes, a couple. This when you migrate a site from Plone 4 to Plone 5.2 and don't create it anew, the drop-down navigation will not be enabled by default. It's set on 0, I think. Maybe we changed that. Can't remember. Things are changing fast. But the other thing is that the sometimes in the whole process, your registry might be gone, and you will get weird messages. I said that before. That's easy to fix by just loading the Plone registry settings that you can have there, and never say purge old equals true, because that will nuke your site. Okay, so why do it this way? This is maybe because there's lots of talks. Okay, we have this magic code that does the migration. We have this transmogrifier pipeline for our super company, and we're doing it this way. And I hear these interesting things, and also hear the question, like on Wednesday, how can Plone gain more market share? And I get a severe case of cognitive dissonance when I hear that, because I think Plone needs a very good out-of-the-box experience regarding migrations, and it doesn't help Plone if every company has their hidden away migration code and tries to sell migrations. I don't want to sell migrations. I want my clients to be able to do their migration for themselves. If it's a bigger project, sure, you need someone, a professional, and they probably want a new theme and they want new features, so it's really good, it's a project. But the important thing about that is the new stuff and not the migration. I don't want to have my clients pay lots of money for, okay, we need to upgrade to Plone 5, and that's, sorry, it's going to cost you 20,000 euros. It's not going to be able to be done any other way. So I really hate that, and for this reason, I've written the migration code from archetypes to dexterity. I've written or helped write the migration from Python 2 to Python 3 and all that stuff. I've written documentation and examples and given talks about that. So please use it, and if there's an issue, speed-wise, for example, or something is broken, file a ticket. Don't send an email, file a ticket, and ask the community to help you, because we all should use that. And if you have custom code that is fixing a problem that you had, or if you have custom code that is migrating, I don't know, Plone FormGen or something else into something new, I would love to see something migrate Mosaic to Volto, but that's probably not possible. Contribute that to the community. That would be so nice. Here's again the package. Here's again a short thing about the how you do that, in which order, and one last thing. I guess everybody thinks that this is going to be super hard and it's going to be tough. Let's just try that. So here is a site I have migrated to Python 3. It's an intranet from a client. It uses a Mosaic front page now, so we're not moving to Volto right now. They're a bit conservative. So this is, oh, you can't see anything. Sorry. This is it. Yeah, this is the site. This is another thing. This is Volto. So while Volto starts up, I'm going to go to the site. It's localhost 8080. Oh, can't see anything. I hope it's localhost 8080. Yeah, there it is. So I log in. I install Plone REST API. That's what I actually already did. Then I go to localhost, and I can't see anything. I go to 3000, hopefully, and see what happens. And hey, there's my content. There's my website. It is, again, the front page is Mosaic, so it doesn't show up, but all the content is there. So if I go to, this is a folder that has a custom content type called staff member. I guess everyone has a content type called staff member somewhere. Thank you, I'm almost done. And you click on it, it contains all the content. You get all the fields from the database, get all the data. So migrating to Plone 6 is actually nothing. The only thing you do is you start up Volto, and then you open it, you install Plone REST API, and that's it. There's, I know, things to do, and I'm very excited to hear the talk about the migration from dexterity form schemata to blocks, and how the guys at Kit Concept approached that. I'm even more excited to see the code released again, and thank you for your time.